Good evening from the National Weather Service office in Lake Charles, Louisiana. I'm meteorologist Donald Jones. I had an opportunity to give you an update this evening, so I took advantage of it. We do have now tropical storm warnings in effect for parts of the Louisiana coast. Now, these don't extend inland, but the Louisiana coast does now have tropical storm warnings in effect. Those were issued as of 4 o'clock this afternoon. A tropical storm watch remains in effect for parts of southeast Texas as well. We're going to talk about all of that regarding the latest on Potential Tropical Cyclone 1, which is a mouthful of a name. We'll see if it actually gets a real name here by this time tomorrow. The National Hurricane Center is indicating the possibility of some development, and we are expecting at least a tropical depression, if not a tropical storm, by this time tomorrow. And if so, if it does reach its tropical storm strength, it would get the A name, the first name of the season. Lucky us, isn't it? I believe that's Arthur, if I'm not mistaken. The first name on the list. It's ironically the same list as the 2020 season, which, as we know, did not go so well for us. We're going to go ahead and talk about the latest and greatest regarding that. We'll talk about all the potential hazards, rain, storm surge. There is going to be a little bit of it. Wind, it's going to be breezy, but not too bad. I don't think we're going to have any kind of, certainly nothing life-threatening from the winds. Although you are going to notice a pickup in the winds just a little bit. And also, what is the last one? Tornadoes. Yeah, there is a low-end possibility for a few tornadoes with some of those bands, as is the case with all landfalling tropical systems. So we're going to talk about all of that as well as answer your questions, because this is a live and interactive briefing. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to post them in our comment section, and I'll answer them just as soon as we get through the briefing portion of our graphics here. So let's go ahead and jump into it here. I see a few of you have already found the comment section. So welcome all. Looks like we've got almost 400 people with us here so far. As I mentioned, we do have a tropical storm warning now in effect for the Louisiana coastline. Now, this does not extend inland, so it's just going to be the coastal parishes. So Cameron, Vermilion, Iberia, St. Martin, St. Mary, but these do not extend inward. So Lake Charles, you are not under a tropical storm warning. Neither is Lafayette. Morgan City, you are, because you're right there along the coastline, but areas further north are not under a tropical storm warning, because we're not expecting tropical storm force winds to get that far inland. Even if we are talking about a minimal tropical storm with those maximum winds around 40 miles an hour, that's just going to be right along the coast. You're not going to get 40-mile-an-hour winds inland beyond the coastline. Now, 20, 25, maybe a gust to 30, that's certainly not out of the realm of possibility, especially when it comes to an occasional gust. But we're not expecting this to be a significant wind threat. This is mainly going to be a heavy rain threat, and that is going to be, by far the biggest or most threatening issue with this disturbance. We are still looking. We had a lot of rain across the region today. We had a lot of flash flooding, especially across parts of central Louisiana. Let me go ahead and throw the radar up there real quick. Just kind of show you what's going on out there at the moment. And things have really kind of calmed down, which we kind of expected. A lot of our computer models were showing things calming down late this afternoon into this evening. And I think we are going to have a break from the rain for most of us here through the late evening. But we are expecting this rain to redevelop early tomorrow morning. So about 2, 3, 4 o'clock tomorrow morning, we expect another round of shower and thunderstorm activity to develop. And this is going to be, I guess you would call it, the outer bands of whatever this potential tropical cyclone becomes here tomorrow morning. You can see those green boxes there indicating the flood warnings. Those are in effect, but those are going to be expiring shortly, and I don't anticipate that those will be reissued as the rain has largely ended. There's a little bit of drizzle still out there, but for the most part, the rain has come to an end across the region, so it is going to give those areas a chance to finally dry out a little bit, let that water run off. And that will certainly improve those conditions. We did get some reports earlier today of some water in homes and some vehicles stranded as well. So it was a fairly serious situation there for a while for parts of the region, but thankfully conditions have begun to improve, at least for now. We are still looking at a continued risk, though, of heavy rainfall and flooding as we go through the next couple of days. We're looking at widespread amounts, 3 to 4, possibly up to 6 inches, especially across parts of south central Louisiana. Now, the thing is, if this storm does manage to kind of get its act together a little bit, we're going to start seeing more banding features, which most of us are familiar with from previous tropical systems. But what if you remember from those systems, a lot of times you get these very narrow swaths where it just rains continuously. So that's when you're going to get that really heavy, those really high rainfall amounts piling up. What's important about that is, though, it's usually a very narrow range where, 20 miles east or west, a lot of those areas see very, very little, if any. So this is not going to verify, as we call it. This is not going to pan out exactly as it's written here. There are going to be some areas across our region that see a lot of rainfall, kind of like we saw today. A lot of central Louisiana saw a whole lot of rainfall. Here in Lake Charles, hardly any at all. So that's going to kind of be the case as we go through the day tomorrow and again Thursday, as this system, whatever it becomes, moves into the area. So there's going to be a lot of, well, not a lot, but some areas are going to see this 6 to 8, possibly 10 inches of rainfall, whereas others are going to see very little to none. And I know that gets a lot of people upset. It's like, you said it was going to rain 5 inches at my house and I got a 1/10 of an inch and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, that doesn't mean that everybody got that. There are some areas that are going to see that. It's just not going to be everywhere. And unfortunately, the meteorology is not good enough for us to pinpoint exactly where those highest areas are going to be. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about it a little bit. Somebody's saying I've got bad sound. Can y'all hear me? I hope so. Let me know if you can't hear me. I'm going to keep talking until you tell me otherwise. So again, we do have a tropical storm warning now in effect. This is the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center. This is the second advisory on potential tropical cyclone. I've got to get it right. Number 1, still located inland right now, but the center of circulation will be moving offshore here sometime in the next couple of hours by late this evening. We are going to be looking at this center getting offshore. And you see it's just going to hug the coastline there. It's really not going to get very far offshore, maybe 10, 20 miles offshore. So that's going to help actually keep it from going, really kind of getting its act together, because it's still going to be interacting with land, even though the center of circulation is out over water. This friction of land is going to keep it pretty well disorganized. So I don't expect, certainly, no kind of rapid intensification. This is not going to be a storm that's going to go from nothing and you're going to wake up tomorrow and all of a sudden it's a hurricane. We absolutely do not expect that to be the case. We may see it a tropical depression by sometime late this evening or overnight. Tropical storm maybe sometime during the day tomorrow. Again, we're talking probably low-end tropical storm, so 40-mile-an-hour winds. That's probably the most optimistic scenario for it. And then we're going to be looking at landfall right now somewhere around Port Arthur, Texas. Now, for those of you watching in Port Arthur, if there are any, you may be like, oh no, the eye of this hurricane is about to make landfall. When we're talking about landfall of a weak tropical storm or tropical depression, the center of circulation is going to be extremely disorganized, and the vast majority of the rain and any kind of impact is actually going to be displaced well away from the center of circulation. So the landfall may be in Port Arthur, Texas, but you may be lucky to see any rain in Port Arthur if that winds up being the case, because a lot of times the heaviest rain is displaced 50, 100 miles from the center of circulation. So the landfall may be in Port Arthur, Texas, but most of the rain may be over towards Lafayette or Baton Rouge and those areas there. So when we're talking about a weak tropical system like this, keep in mind that the landfall is not important at all. It's where those bands wind up setting up that's going to be the important issue. All right, most people are telling me they can hear me fine, so I'll take it. All right. We do still have, as I said, those tropical storm warnings are now in effect for coastal portions of Louisiana, essentially from the Texas-Louisiana state line all the way east to Morgan City, and the coastal waters offshore for that. We do still have a tropical storm watch in effect for coastal portions of Jefferson County and points further west down towards Galveston and points further south than there. That's not on this graphic here. So the difference is a tropical storm warning means that tropical storm force conditions are expected within, I believe it's 36 hours. So we're kind of within that window now. And it is becoming increasingly likely that we'll at least get some gusts to tropical storm force across the coastal waters and right along the coastline. Now, again, those winds are not going to make it very far inland. So wind is not going to be a major threat with this system. The winds will bring in a little bit of a storm surge. We're looking at about 2 to 4 feet of potential surge. So coastal flooding is going to be an issue if you have property right along the immediate coastline, and it typically floods when we get a strong south wind. You're going to see that additional flooding again. But as far as damage from winds further inland, we're not expecting that to be the case. The biggest issue is going to be the heavy rain and the potential for flooding. We do still have a flash flood watch in effect. This remains in effect. It's actually been extended till 7 p.m. Thursday because we are expecting rain pretty much all day tomorrow, at least in those bands, and that's going to continue into Thursday as that low pressure system makes landfall and eventually moves up and off to the northeast. A lot of times we'll get those trailing bands behind it, and that will those can linger for 12, 24 hours, even when the center of circulation is maybe way up in Arkansas or Tennessee. You can still have bands extending all the way back to the coastline as the low moves off to the northeast. That's why we've got that flood watch in effect for that long. I mentioned the potential for surge. 2 to 4 feet of storm surge is expected, essentially from Galveston Bay all the way as far east as Morgan City. And so we are looking at a risk for coastal flooding. So we do have a coastal flood warning in effect for essentially all of the coastline here of southeast Texas and Louisiana. And then we have a coastal flood advisory in effect for Sabine Lake and Calcasieu Lake. What's the difference? The difference between an advisory and a warning means that we're expecting 3 feet, or I'm sorry, a warning means we're expecting more than 1.5 feet of coastal flooding. And then an advisory means 1.5 feet or less or thereabout. And that's what we're expecting for the lakes. We are going to be looking at some water potentially pushing up Sabine Pass and Calcasieu Pass and holding the back. That's going to kind of push some water over the lakes. It's not going to get too far, but it is going to provide or produce some minor flooding for Calcasieu and Sabine Lakes. And then more significant flooding, again, 2 to 4 feet right along the immediate coastline with those strong southerly winds, potentially to tropical storm force, which is 40 miles an hour. Finally, we do have the potential for tornadoes. That's the case with all landfalling tropical systems. It's a low threat. It always is. But it seems like even in the weakest tropical systems, we always wind up with at least a couple of quick spin-up tornadoes. And we are expecting, we haven't seen any today, but there was a risk today. And I think there was one that looked pretty good actually over in southeast Louisiana that moved it moved across the state line into Picayune, Mississippi earlier this afternoon. So that's the only tornado warning I think I've seen. So that's what I'm talking about. There's not going to be widespread tornadoes, but there are going to be the potential for 1 or 2. And that's going to be the case over the next few days. So we're going to be looking at a tornado risk essentially along and south of the I-10 corridor tomorrow, and then going into Thursday, pretty much all of Louisiana is in that marginal risk. That's what the areas highlighted in green here are. That's a category 1 out of 5 on the Storm Prediction Center severe weather scale. So that means that there is a low end possibility for tornadoes. And those are going to primarily be within those bands that we were talking about. Wherever those bands set up, that's where the potential for tornadoes are going to be. Effectively, if it's not actively raining on you, you're not looking at a significant tornado threat, or really any tornado threat with a tropical cyclone. As far as this is just kind of indicating what I just talked about, there's no hail threat. There's no real straight line wind damage. This is not a convective severe weather event. This is a tropical severe weather event. So tornadoes are really the only appreciable severe weather risk with those landfalling tropical systems. This is just a graphic here. This is just showing the kind of the 6-hourly breakdown of the forecast rainfall probabilities. I'll put that big for you so you can take a look at it here because it is kind of difficult to read. I'll get my ugly face out the way. So you can see very high rain chances tomorrow, continuing into Thursday. Friday, we're still looking at pretty decent rain chances in the afternoon. That's going to be due to some lingering moisture and also just those kind of what we call diurnally driven storms, because it gets warm in the afternoon. You get those afternoon pop-up thunderstorms, and that's going to be that just with some better moisture from that's lingering from the tropical system. Same thing on Saturday. It's going to be a little bit more than we're typically accustomed to seeing because we have that added moisture from the tropical system. But those are going to be driven more by just the heating of the day than anything else. Taking a look at the forecast rainfall totals here for this is essentially goes from this afternoon all the way through Sunday morning. So this is going to be the storm and then those afternoon thunderstorms we mentioned going through the weekend. We added them all together because at this point the entire region is pretty saturated, and it's not going to take a whole lot to start flooding ongoing again. So kind of keep that in mind. The graphic on the left here is the most likely scenario. That's our official forecast. So we're looking at anywhere between about 3 to 6 inches. Again, not everybody's going to see that much. and don't get too specific with these exact numbers and these exact locations, because this is certainly not correct. But this kind of gives you an idea of how much we could potentially see. And then the graphic on the right there is your reasonably or your reasonable worst case scenario, as we call it. You know, if you get stuck under one of those bands, you could potentially see those amounts. So then they range from roughly about 6 to up to 10 inches in a few locations. This is a graphics that are issued by the Weather Prediction Center, depicting the likelihood, probabilistically speaking, of seeing flooding. The graphic all the way on the left, that was today. We were in a moderate risk. That means we were seeing a 30 to 50% chance of flooding within 25 miles of a location. And you saw those flash flood warnings that I showed you here at the top of the broadcast. That certainly verified. We had quite a bit of flooding across central Louisiana, as well as parts of Hardin County. Today got hit pretty hard with some very heavy rainfall. So that moderate risk worked itself out pretty well. As we go into tomorrow, we're expecting another moderate risk. That's the area highlighted in red there, and that covers a large portion of southwest and south central Louisiana. A little bit lower risk up further to the north across central Louisiana, because keep in mind the direction the storm's coming. It's coming up the Texas coastline. So the higher risk is going to be a little bit closer to the coast. Then as we get into Thursday, the storm has made landfall. It's moving inland. And so the overall highest risk of flooding kind of shifts to the northeast along with that circulation. Heading into Friday, we are still looking at some residual, again, that moisture with those afternoon thunderstorms, and we already have a very saturated ground. So it's not going to take much. A couple of inches will be enough to cause some flooding. So we do still have a slight risk for rainfall. That's a 15 to 30% chance of seeing flash flooding across parts of central Louisiana. And then even into Saturday, we're at marginal risk, which is roughly about a 5 to 15% chance of seeing flooding. So still a low end risk all the way through the weekend. It's not going to be a rain out, though. Our whole weekend is not going to be ruined by storms. Most of this activity will be out of here by then. So there will be some afternoon thunderstorms, but the Father's Day weekend is not going to be a washout, so that's certainly some good news. The graphic you're seeing here is the potential for river flooding, because obviously we are expecting some significant river flooding. In fact, we already have some significant river flooding ongoing across parts of the region. But each of those dots there represents a river point along the Calcasieu, the Sabine, the Neches, the Atchafalaya, and each one of those is the potential for flooding. The orange the dots, I should say, in orange, those are areas that are expected to reach minor flood stage. The red is moderate flood stage, and the purples, or I don't know which one, I guess that's a purplish color there. Those are the potential for major flood stage, which is usually very significant, potentially life-threatening flooding along area rivers. So those are forecasts. Those are not necessarily what's going on right now, but that is what we are expecting here over the next 36 hours or so, as that water falls from the sky and then promptly runs off into all the area rivers. Talking real quickly about the wind speeds, I mentioned that wind was not going to be a huge issue with this, and it's not going to be. And this is going to kind of illustrate that in a little more detail. It is going to be breezy. 20, 25 mile per hour wind gusts are certainly within the realm of possibility both tomorrow afternoon as well as Thursday. You can see we're looking at, these are the Southeast Texas cities. This is an hour by hour breakdown of our forecast wind speeds and directions. And so you can see a lot of 20, 25 mile an hour winds both tomorrow and Thursday, but that's about it. That's about as high as those winds are going to get away from the immediate coastline. So this is not expected to be a significant wind issue. You can see Cameron right along the immediate coastline there. That box that extends all the way across, roughly about 20, 25 miles an hour for those winds. Being right along the coast, you're going to probably see some of the highest winds, but even that is going to be fairly limited. So same thing across much of central and southwest Louisiana, 20 to 25 mile an hour winds. And taking a look at the same, a lot of these are cities in south central Louisiana. So you can see, again, we're looking at roughly about 20 to 25 miles an hour. There are a couple of spots. You can see a couple down towards New Iberia, Gaydon, Abbeville, being right along the coast there, where you may see those gusts close to tropical storm force, but it's just for an hour or two. So this is not expected to be a major wind event for the vast majority of the region, and I don't expect this is going to be enough to cause any kind of significant power outages, at least not from the wind. Now, we talked earlier about the possibility of some trees going down in the floodwaters that could potentially knock some power or knock some power out, and that is certainly a possibility, but that is going to be pretty isolated. The majority of the area should keep power for this event. It's just going to be a few locations that could potentially see those power outages if a tree were to fall onto a power line from just the ground being so saturated. So that's what we have for you here this evening from the National Weather Service. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in our comment section. I'll be happy to answer them here over the next little while. I'm going to go ahead and bounce that right back over here, and then I'll check to see if you do have any questions. So let me just read through the comment section here, just a moment. Tommy says the Houston media is already calling it Arthur. Well, is right, because it's not officially a named storm yet. Only the Hurricane Center can make that designation. I got a feeling that they might, but we're not there yet. Tammy asks, how is this looking for San Leon, Texas? Honestly, we don't cover that area. I'm not exactly sure where San Leon, Texas is. Each region has its own weather service office, so you find out which one you're covered by, and you'll have to send them a message on their social media, because honestly, I'm not sure where that is. I'm pretty good at geography, but I don't have every town in Texas memorized, unfortunately, just the ones in the area we cover. Tommy says 2 total inches with a ½ inch today at the Jefferson Chambers County line in southeast Texas. Thank you for that report. And yeah, that does kind of line up roughly with what we were seeing. There was quite a bit of rain across Hardin County earlier this afternoon. I think someone reported close to 6 inches in that area, and there was reports of some pretty significant flooding in that area. Charlotte asks, what time is the expected landfall? We're going to be looking at, if you want to, I'm going to put it in air quotes, landfall, which is to say that, there is going to be a center moving across the coast, but it's not going to be very well defined. As far as timing, we're looking at tomorrow evening, probably about sometime between maybe 6 and 10 p.m. tomorrow evening for it to actually move back on shore. Terry asks, what are the chances of this pulling a Humberto in 07? Humberto was a storm that went from nothing to hurricane in about, what was it, a little over 12 hours, something like that. It was a situation where we went to sleep with it as nothing and it woke up as a Category 1 hurricane. We don't expect that to be the case. The conditions in the Gulf are only marginally favorable for development as it is. So there is some wind shear that's going to be tearing the storm apart to begin with. It's going to be hugging the coastline very closely, so it's still going to be interacting with land, and none of the computer models are showing any kind of significant intensification. So everything that we are aware of as meteorologists would lead us to believe that this is not going to do any kind of a real significant intensification. Could it become a low-end tropical storm by tomorrow morning? Yes, that would probably be about the ceiling of what we would expect. Dana is staying in Cameron Parish, not used to the area. Should we move more inland? That is a good question. That's going to depend on exactly where in Cameron Parish you are. Cameron Parish has dealt with these kind of storms many, many times, so they're very well aware of what floods and what does not. I recommend contacting your local parish. You can contact law enforcement, Cameron Parish Police, local politicians, emergency management, and they can give you more information based on exactly where you are. There is going to be coastal flooding that typically floods parts of Cameron Parish right along the immediate coastline. So yes, there is going to be some flooding in that area. Depending on exactly where you are is going to depend whether you actually experience that or not. But I recommend, contacting your local law enforcement. They'd be able to tell you whether the area you're in typically floods when we get coastal flooding like that. Cindy Guillory, watching us on YouTube, says, thank you, Donald and NWS team. You are quite welcome, Cindy. Zenobia says, Donald, Southeast Texas weather guys in the state line area are saying this is a non-event for us. They said basically we're going to get maybe an inch of rain Thursday. We'll never know anything happened. No rain at all. Do you agree with their perspective? It's possible. And that's why I was talking earlier about where the band's set up, because a lot of times, let's say this forecast verifies exactly as we have it here, and there is a landfall right around Port Arthur, Texas. We were talking about how the Gulf was sheared a little bit just a little while ago. That shear tends to push that rain off to the east or to the right of that center of circulation. So there could wind up a situation where there's very little actual rain right at the center of circulation where it makes landfall. So I'm not going to say that they're necessarily wrong in this case. There could be, depending on exactly how organized it is, there could be very little rain exactly where the center makes landfall. So the rainfall totals at the state line could be on the fairly low side. An inch, 2 inches, that's not necessarily going to be wrong. What I'm showing you when I'm showing you these graphics here is kind of, again, it's kind of the worst case scenario if you get under one of these bands. We saw a good bit, today, what happened today was a fairly decent example of that. We saw a whole lot of rain across Hardin County, and we saw very, very little a little bit further south down in Jefferson County. I think we had someone that just reported they got about, what was an inch and a half, somewhere around here, whereas we had 6 inches across Hardin County. Unfortunately, that kind of detail we just can't predict. So, where that rain is going to set up, where, one side is going to get an inch and the other side is going to get 6 inches, we can't say with certainty. We can say that some parts of the region are going to see a lot of rain, but not so much right where that storm is making landfall. So yeah, it's very possible that what they're telling you could very well be the way things play out. Deja says, meteorologist Rob Perillo gives an update saying less rain than expected for the Lafayette area. Is this accurate? Again, it depends on exactly where that line of storms sets up. We're still anticipating 4 to 6 inches across parts of South Central Louisiana. If that center of circulation were to shift a little bit further to the east, then those highest rainfall totals would also shift a little bit further to the east. So it's just going to depend on exactly where those bands wind up, and that's going to be based in large part of exactly how organized the tropical system is when it actually begins to move inland. Kim is north of Baton Rouge, and she's had 10 inches in the last 2 days. See, that's what I'm talking about. You've gotten clobbered while other areas have seen very, very little. Stacy says, my kids are with their cousins in Kingwood, Texas, and we're supposed to come back tomorrow. How would driving from there be coming back to Lake Charles? Should they just say? If you're comfortable driving in rain, then you're going to be okay. I don't think, again, wind is not going to be a concern. It's going to be breezy, 20, 25 miles an hour. But if you're comfortable driving through a typical thunderstorm, I think you're probably going to be fine. Serena says, what time will your lives be tomorrow? I'm going to try to do another one here tomorrow, either 11 o'clock or noon. It's just going to depend on how things evolve. I'm working the forecast desk as well, so I've got to get all these, different watches, warnings, all of that stuff out and put together, and that takes a lot of time. So it's difficult for me to be able to schedule exactly when the briefings are going to be, but I will try to post it on social media as soon as I can tomorrow morning to give you time to know when we're going to be doing it. Trevon says, so how bad will it be for Orange, Texas? Winds, tornadoes, or what? Just heavy rain. Just heavy rain. I don't expect, certainly not winds. The tornado threat is not zero, but it's extremely low. The heavy rain is going to be your bigger threat. Taryn says, I just dropped my son off at summer camp yesterday, located between Kinder and Reeves. What are the concerns for impact in that area? Just rain. Rain is going to be the biggest issue and the potential for flooding. Again, I can't say for certain whether you're going to see 3 inches or 6 inches, but there is going to be the potential for flooding in that area tomorrow. Stacy says, my daughter works in Lake Charles and said it's barely raining. What are your thoughts on flooding there? Well, that goes back to what we were talking about. Today, central Louisiana, Hardin County, Texas, they got all the rain. Will that be the case again tomorrow? Probably not. It's going to be somewhere else that's going to see 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 inches of rain. As far as the rest of this evening, I don't expect too much in the way of rain. In fact, we looked at the radar just a short time ago. I'll throw it back up there. There's very little rain left out there. In fact, all of those flood warnings, with the exception of one, have expired. That one's southern parts of St. Landry Parish and northern Lafayette Parish. So I don't expect too much more in the way of rainfall this evening, but the rain is going to pick back up again before sunrise tomorrow, probably 3 or 4 in the morning or thereabouts. And then we're going to see, where those bands set up again tomorrow. So no, we didn't see the rain here in Lake Charles today. We may wind up seeing a good bit more tomorrow. It's just going to depend on exactly where those bands set up. Kristen's asking about the Morgan City rainfall. Morgan City, I think, is more likely to see fairly significant amounts of rainfall. You see in this graphic here, it's kind of a little bit of a lower amount at the moment. That's a bit of a misnomer because, it's just going to depend on exactly where those bands set up. We could very well see 4, 6, potentially 8 inches of rain over in the Morgan City area. That's why that flood watch is in effect for the entire region, because we don't have an exact knowledge base of exactly where those bands are going to set up. And that's why I'm reluctant to even show these kind of rainfall graphics here, because I know it's going to be wrong. We all know it's going to be wrong because Mother Nature doesn't make pretty pictures like this. It's going to be spot here, spot there, spot up here. And that's just how that evolves. And unfortunately, we don't know who's going to see those highest rainfall totals until it's all said and done. Laura asked, what is the chance of it stalling over Southeast Texas like Imelda did in 19? We do not expect this to stall. That's the good news. It's not going to be moving particularly fast. Right now, it's moving at 6 miles an hour. I think it's going to pick up a little bit of forward speed, maybe 8-ish or thereabouts. So it's not going to be moving fast, but we don't expect it to stall. It's going to be actually lifting into there's an upper level trough up here, and it's going to be lifting into that trough. That trough's going to be helping lift it off to the northeast. So we do not expect this to stall. Trump says, what's that? Work is closed? I didn't say that. I did not say that. Do not pretend like I said that. All right, let's see. Dean says, there goes the saltwater fishing for a while. There's something to be said for that, because all of this water's got to run out somewhere, and it's going to be running out of the area rivers right out into the Gulf. So that will affect the salinity right near the coastline there. You are not wrong. Phyllis says, why are other stations, parentheses Rob Perillo, now showing heavier rain east, but you are still showing New Iberia with heavy rain? Because there's still the possibility of heavy rain in New Iberia. What Rob Perillo is showing, I have no doubt, are computer models, which have their place. That they certainly are able to depict those trends. But we take a consensus approach here. We're not looking at an individual computer model. So we're looking at a conglomeration of just about all of the computer models. And that kind of gives us an overall view of the risk, rather than looking at a single computer model run that's now kind of switching back and forth. So that's the difference that you're probably seeing there. Phyllis asks, will there be training? Yes, there will be training, absolutely. It's just a matter of exactly where those bands are going to set up, and that's the $64,000 question that we just don't know. Will the training be, Lake Charles? Will it be Lafayette? Will it be New Iberia? Will it be Baton Rouge? That's unfortunately something I can't answer you in advance. Yes, there will be training within those bands, because what's going to happen is the center is going to be moving up this way and the bands are going to be out here somewhere. Where exactly? I don't know. Just to be completely frank with you. But they are going to set up somewhere, and so those areas are going to see a flooding threat. Madison asked about DeRidder. DeRidder is, again, just going to be the rain threat. That's the only thing that you're really going to have up that way. We are not expecting any kind of wind threat. You know, again, maybe 20, 25 mile an hour wind gusts at the most. And that's going to be anywhere away from the immediate coastline. Once you get 10 miles inland, maybe even less than that, you're not going to be looking at much of a wind threat. Tornado threat is minimal. It is there, but it is very small. Obviously, you're not going to have a surge threat in DeRidder. So that leaves heavy rain and the potential for flooding. That is the big issue for the vast majority of the region, and that is the case for DeRidder. Shadow Gaming Reviews, got my honey lavender tea to ride this out. Greetings from Houston. Greetings from here in Lake Charles. Donnie asked, do we got the radar issue solved from the other week? With the issue we were having was the radars produce heat naturally because they take a lot of electricity. So they have to have air conditioners to cool them down. Well, one of those air conditioners broke, which is wonderful. So we were running on one air conditioner that was essentially the radar was overheating periodically. We added some Freon to that one air conditioner. It helped a little bit. But not completely. The new air conditioner did arrive, but I don't think it's been installed yet. So we have the advantage of the fact that it's cloudy and raining. Temperatures are cooler. That's letting the radar run. We haven't had to turn it off again since, what's today, Tuesday? Probably since either Saturday or Sunday. So it's not fixed, but it's cool enough that it's been able to operate. And we're hoping, fingers crossed, that that'll continue to be the case. Phyllis appreciates the fact that I'm acting like I'm God. It's dumb of us to ask questions. There's no way for you to know. I don't think I'm acting like God. I'm telling you what I do know and what I don't know. There's a lot I don't know, trust me. Let's see. Dane says, will Southeast Texas, Southwest Louisiana get bad weather? Will Buena, Texas have bad weather? Can it be hurricane? No, it's not going to be a hurricane. That's for certain. Well, I don't want to say we're for certain. We're 99.67% sure that it will not be a hurricane. You are going to see some rain, potentially heavy rain. That's really going to be the only threat that you have for Buena, Texas. Same thing for Southeast Texas or Southwest Louisiana. Rebecca says, parents with kids, school is out, get those snacks. We all know they're hungry every 2 minutes. That's good advice in general, tropical system or not. All right, I think I've reached the bottom of my thing here. Are we cooked? No, we're not cooked. We'll be cooked by this weekend when we're back in the 90s again, but actually we're less than cooked now because it's nice and comfy out there in the lower 80s. All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap up for the time being. If you have a question that I missed for some reason, or you think of one once I get off the briefing here, feel free to send us a direct message on Facebook. Where also you can email me directly. My email's been on the screen most of the briefing here. On the bottom right-hand corner, my name, Donald.Jones at NOAA, NOAA.gov. I'll be happy to answer your questions that way. Our phone number is also on the screen, but the public line turns off at 4 p.m., so you can't call us right now, but you can call us again tomorrow morning after 8 a.m. if you do have a question. Area code 337-477-5285. In the meantime, contact us on social media. It's a more reliable way to get in touch with us this evening and overnight tonight. Stay safe, stay dry. It is going to be a little wet out there the next couple of days. Our plan is to do another one of these briefings tomorrow morning. I'm going to say either 11 a.m. or noon. I'll give you an exact time tomorrow. I'll post it on our social media pages so that it'll be, we'll let you know as soon as I know, depending on what's going on tomorrow morning. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow morning.